Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about some top tips on how to nail your resume for UX jobs. So first of all, we're gonna look at a real resume as an example with critique lens on to see how we might improve it. And then I will share with you some top tips on how to make your resume stand out. So before I jump in, just a quick reminder, I share everything about UX on my YouTube channel, from portfolio reviews, design quiz, to interviewing tips. So if you're interested on this type of content, please feel free to hit the subscribe so you won't miss any of my future content. Okay, let's do it. So we are looking at a resume as an example here, and some personal information like name and company name has been blocked for the privacy reason. But let's focus on the content here rather than visual and take a look at how we might improve it. So first of all, this is a product designer, and there is a line of introduction here. Product designer with 10 plus years of experience in architecture, collaborating with stakeholders, engineers, consultants, and end users, committed to achieving human-centered and sustainable design solutions with a positive impact. Okay, as a headline, I think this is a little bit too long, and also it seems like it really focuses and emphasizes on the architectural background here, like 10 plus years of experience in architecture. But what about your product design experience? As this is a resume that candidate is using to apply for product design or UX jobs, I would definitely recommend you to focus on your most relevant experience. It seems like a 2-column layout. On the left, there is contact information and education, skills and tools. On the right, this is actually where, as a hiring manager, my attention will go right into is your most recent UX design project experience. This designer has listed UX design projects and then experience. I'm not sure why there are two different headlines, but let's take a look. I believe under experience, it seems like these are all focused on architectural projects, if I'm correct. Yes, project designer and architect. If we look at the language, for example, coordinate with multidisciplinary team for a new hospital design project. So yes, I believe this candidate is showing his or her UX design experience here at the top, which is good. And then their other experience in architecture down below and their experience. The problem here is the majority of your resume is really talking about your experience as an architect, and it doesn't quite convincing. How much experience do you actually have as a UX designer? So let's take a look at UX projects experience first. Conducted extensive user research, market analysis for discovery phase, product design iteration, improved usability with preference testing. And it seems like those might be PACY, travel bug, and voice UI design. It looks to me this might be talking about an actual individual product that this designer has worked on. It feels a little bit odd to me because of the bullet point is talking in general what this designer has done. But then when you get into each product, this information is just too brief. For example, PACY, responsive web app for a payment system. What was your role? What have you actually done? Is the bullet point above applied to every single project here? If that's the case, what is the design outcome? I think the top problem of this resume is you really need to focus on your most recent UX design projects, and that should be like taking 80 to 90% of the space of this resume. It's okay to include your architectural background and related work experience, but I would make that part really brief. This is a very common challenge I've been observing from folks who are trying to change career from another background with quite some experience already established. And the focus is very confusing because they tend to focus more on their other career background rather than the UX experience. So here, it seems like you are really experienced architect, but I can't quite tell how qualified you are as a UX designer just because the focus here doesn't quite support your application for UX jobs. So I would definitely expand on each project instead of group all of three together. I think it probably will help you more to separate each product, list your role and scope, and talk about your key contributions and achievement of each project in separate sections. So that hopefully can help you expand your UX experience more, also showcase how you might be a qualified UX design candidate. The other side, is very high level and general here. Like, for example, Pacey is a responsive web app for payment system. Travelbug is a mobile app for traveling with kids. It's kind of explaining what each product is about. Yes, it's helpful, but it's not that important to support the goal as a resume. Because as a hiring manager, all I want to know is what you have done. What was your role, your scope? What was the challenge you had and how did you overcome it? Rather than like what the company background is or what does that product is about. If you want to introduce that, keep it really brief, but really, really focus on what you have done. And if you have any data, put those numbers down. It's always more convincing if you have some data to show how your design has impacted the outcome rather than just saying, okay, improved usability with preference testing. Make it really specific and talk about how your design has positively changed the outcome of the product. Everything under experience here seems like really focused on this designer's past experience as an architect. I would definitely encourage you, first of all, condense this section. You don't really need to show too much detail of the project, and also try to use the language like UX language to frame your architectural background and your past experience to be more relevant and supportive to your current role. So now that we have looked at this real example of resume from a designer who's trying to change their career from architecture to UX design, I wanted to share with you some helpful tips on how to make your resume really stand out, especially if you're looking for your first UX jobs. Now that we looked at this resume example from a designer with architectural background, let me share with you some top tips on how to make your resume stand out for your UX jobs. Number one, be clear on your role and scope. So this is something I've noticed very often. People tend to mix job titles, for example, UX/UI designer, UX designer and researcher, or UX designer and architect, and so on. If you are applying for UX design jobs, just call yourself UX designer. Don't mix job titles or your current versus past background, and just be super clear. Use the title of the job that you are applying for as your main job title in the resume. And the other side is be very clear about your project scope. When you put together your resume, the ultimate goal is really to get you to the interview. As a hiring manager or recruiter, what I'm really curious about is what you have done. So focus on your job scope, whether it is building a mobile app from 0 to 1, or it is redesigning a web app. Be very specific on what was your project scope and highlight the complexity, the challenge, and how you solved it, and also the outcome. So be very specific. Instead of the product or company background, focus on your specific role and project scope. Number two, use strong verbs. In resume, this is where you should highlight the key achievement of each project. So instead of saying, okay, develop or created or help the product, so on, try to use the strong verbs such as lead, drive, own the project. It is extremely helpful to use those strong verbs to tell the project story, especially if you have owned the project and involved from the beginning to the end. Show that in your resume. On the subject, I have created a UX resume writing tips. It is 100% free. It's basically where I summarized the top tips, how to make your resume stand out, and where I will include some specific examples on what are some good verbs to use when you are putting together your resume. So please feel free to check it out in this link below. Next, I want to talk about is use bullet point. Keep it to one page, and instead of using long paragraph, just use bullet point. Because most of the time people are in a glancing mode when they are looking at candidates' resume. It might only take a few minutes or even seconds. So avoid long paragraphs and make it super easy to read. Also, pay attention to the visual hierarchy. Like in terms of the layout, this is the part I'm not talking about the visual design or illustration or color preference. Instead, focus on the visual hierarchy. If someone is showing you this resume, you only have 2 seconds. What is the first thing you will be looking at? What should be the focal point in your resume? So the visual hierarchy is something will help your audience to capture the most critical information with a quick glance. Think about what is the primary information and design your resume in a way that can really help your audience grasp the most critical information in seconds. So another tips I wanted to share is to focus on your most recent professional experience. So if you are a fresh grad or changing career from a different career background, just put your most recent UX project experience at the very top instead of academic background or architectural career experience. I understand, from timing perspective, that might be outweighing your UX experience at that point. But as long as you are applying for UX design jobs in your resume under work or professional experience, the number one thing should be talking about what is your most recent UX design project experience. And the next tip I have for you is frame your past background to support your current role. This is something, especially if you are changing career from a different background, I would encourage you to use UX language to explain your other career experience. No matter your past background might be architecture, visual design, or other design related background, the creative process has some common points like starting with conceptual sketches and then develop the idea, building some prototypes for testing and validate the design. Try to use the UX language to explain your past background. That will help you to frame your other background be as relevant as possible, so it is contributing and supporting your application as a UX designer. So the last thing I want to talk about is demonstrate your impact with data. So ask yourself a couple questions. Have you launched any product? Have you run an experiment? Have you perhaps done any user research or user testing? These are all valid points for you to collect data to communicate how you try to iterate your design to make it better. So use data to communicate your design impact, how your design have solved user problems or achieved the business goals. Try to collect those data and be intentional. This is something could also be very helpful in the long term. Before you actually jump in any product, really ask the question that what is the success matrix? How do we define the success of this job? With that mindset, it will help you keep that big picture in your mind. What is the end goal of this project? Also help your team stay on track, especially at those milestones, to be able to collect certain data and validate what are things you might want to adjust or iterate. So that is all we have today. We looked at an example of a resume and also shared some helpful tips to how to make your resume really stand out. On the other hand, I just want to mention I have developed this UX resume writing tips. It is 100% free. It is a summary of some top tips on how to really nail your UX resume, especially if you're looking for your first UX jobs or changing from a different career. Also, I've introduced resume template that shares the resume, helped me land my very first UX job. If you're interested, please feel free to take a look and download it from the link below. So that is all I have for today. If you have any questions or comment, please feel free to share with me, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.